Our speaker this morning is our own Stephanie Spencer. She is the proud daughter of Leon and Inga Spencer. Stephanie grew up in the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship since she was in preschool, so almost a birth near you. Well, Stephanie now is a licensed clinical social worker, and she practices here in the Statesboro area. And she's going to share with us about what would Martin Luther King do. Stephanie, come and share with us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think it's fair to say that I'm a bit nervous. What would Martin Luther King Jr. say today about opening the door? Well, I'm going to start off by saying I don't presume to exactly know what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would say, but based on history, I would imagine that he would be concerned about white supremacy, destructive politics, war, blatant inequalities, gross injustice, and lack of moral accountability. How can we as a religious community be accountable in addressing these issues and living beyond the dream? Well, we as Unitarian Universalists, we have 7 principles that guide us. But it's a proposed 8th principle that challenges us to embody the messages of Dr. King. It reads, we, the member congregations of Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Maya Wade Harper, she's a young, active Unitarian Universalist. She wrote, sometimes justice work can be hard. You doubt that what you're doing is enough. If it is small, you may believe that it doesn't even matter. I found out about the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalist when I went to Youth Midwest Leadership School in the summer of 2019. Upon returning to my home church, I brought the 8th principle to my minister and to the board. Thus began the whirlwind of work my church and I did to vote on that principle. To me, the 8th principle is a call of action to stand up for people who are oppressed and crushed by white supremacy. The experience of helping my church adopt the 8th principle was something I'd never done. When I raised my hand to join my church in adopting the 8th principle, I was struck on how exhausting the process had been, how there's still so much work to be done, but it's also how rewarding it was. My mama tells me that this work is sacred, and I agree. It is sacred and necessary. So I asked myself, why did I agree to do this Martin Luther King service? Honestly, when I was asked, I was flattered. I saw it as an opportunity to serve my religious community. I had stopped being a part of any UU congregation many years ago following a general assembly held in Charlotte, North Carolina, where many white UUs were fighting to have an antebellum ball celebrating Thomas Jefferson's birthday in history period costumes. Many of us Black folks were wondering, should we dress as slaves? I also witnessed many white UUs defend keeping the Thomas Jefferson District name, despite it greatly offending people of color. This made me question our first principle and believing in the inherent dignity and worth of all beings. A recent service right here in Statesboro, I was asked, along with 4 other Black UU women, to speak, and it encouraged me to speak after a long period of silence and healing. I saw it as my turn to step up once again. Perhaps the accumulation of the efforts of our own Reverend Jane Page and our congregation's increased involvement in the Black community and Black Lives Matter made a difference. Perhaps I was in a place where I understand and I'm no longer surprised by the depths of the pain of white supremacy. Perhaps I found some healing from my own church hurts. Perhaps I saw an opportunity once again to become an intricate part of my local religious community. When I reflect on my own religious journey within the UU community, it parallels with my life in the larger community, in my larger community. My space was no longer truly inclusive and holistic to nurture a girl of color to a woman of color. Perhaps this invitation to talk today made me feel welcome at the table once again. My question is, will my religious community be willing to truly make more an effort, not just by words, but by action? Imagine, what does MLK Jr. and white supremacy have to do with Unitarian Universalism? Well, did you know that Coretta Scott King attended many UU services before she even met Dr. King, and they had considered becoming UUs? Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, president of Starr King School of Religion, wrote in the UU World about her conversation with Coretta Scott King regarding their UU experience and its implications. Imagine what it would have meant to the civil rights movement and Unitarian Universalism. Dr. King, in addressing the UUA General Assembly, talked about Rip Van Winkle sleeping through the revolution. And he encouraged us not to sleep during the revolution. So, what can we do? Ask ourselves, what can I do? Well, I believe the time is right to re-examine our UU principles. It's a time to acknowledge and be accountable. It's important to be able to acknowledge both Black and white bodies that have been impacted by white supremacy, trauma. It's time to address our wounds. King took time to address his wounds as well as the wounds of the nation. Make no mistake, it is no coincidence that we have witnessed an insurrection of white supremacy, following by Georgia electing a Black preacher from Ebenezer Baptist Church, where King preached, and a Jewish man to the Senate. Let that sink in. For the first time, we'll have the most diverse cabinet, and Georgia is blue. The insurrection of white supremacy is expected when diversity is no longer just an idea. So let us examine those principles that assist us through strong, slow, and steady like Bella the mule. It is essential as a religious community that we call out on our politicians that we elected. Our spiritual principles ought to stir something in us and ask ourselves, Who do we want to be in the light of white supremacy? Are you willing to hold yourself accountable? And our actions. What does the 8th principle embody about King's message? Well, the 8th principle speaks about accountability. It defines accountability as white UUs holding themselves accountable to communities of color to make sure whites do what they say they're going to do. In practice, that they can mean having a people of color caucus within congregations, districts, etc., to discern, and express the needs and concerns of the rest of the community. Black UUs hold each other accountable and help each other see and dismantle the signs of internalized racism. We need an effective mechanism or structure to ensure this. Similarly, for other oppressions as well. Decide who we want to be. Are you willing to join the soul work? Reverend Bill Siegfried, past UUA president, states, white supremacy is a work of white folks to address. It's important that Black folks don't do the work for them. It's important for us to address our wounds and express our anger and discomfort. Emotions are gifts and they're dangerous when we ignore them. From anger, we can gain strength and assertiveness. Jesus, yes, he even taught us that there's a time to be angry. It's what we do with it and who we decide to become. This congregation has an opportunity to lead and be a requires more of our attention in creating a beloved community. And yes, the 8th principle speaks about that too. It defines a beloved community as what happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, sexual orientation backgrounds, identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seeks to realize justice within the community and in the broader world. We, the members, congregations of Unitarian Universalists, covet to affirm and promote the journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and institutions. In closing, King said, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. Martin Luther King also said, let us realize that the arc of moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It is time to be like Bella, to be someone special who is strong, who is steady, who's persistent, who's not easily spooked or distracted. Thank you.